what I've done is I have taken all of the notes from the breakout sessions yesterday, and I have synthesized those into a blog post. So I'm going to read that blog post to you. And then I have about 4 pages of bullet points from the breakouts today, because I can't synthesize that fast. And I'm just going to read through those. And I hope that you get a sense of what was discussed in the groups that are outside of your group, and get a flavor of the nature of the topics that came out through both of those breakout sessions. We have 22 minutes left. What's happening after this, Kat? Then we have a coffee break. So I think we're probably going to finish a bit early. So I'll probably get through all this in about 7 minutes, I would guess. And we can have an open discussion, a few questions and answers, and then maybe just go for coffee then. Not that kind of coffee. Okay. So my thanks to Kevin Dolby, Martin Rolands, Mike Taylor, and Andrea Michalek for taking the notes today. And yesterday we were talking about institutions and metrics, and there were a couple of themes. Like, how are institutions using metrics, and how could they use metrics? And it seemed that all metrics could be used as a way to indicate the pathway of impact. Institutions should define their game plan. What do they want to achieve? What metrics can help get them there? They could give guidance to researchers on what platforms to adopt. Researchers are telling us that the landscape is cluttered and they weren't exactly sure which horse to back. But at the same time, recognize that institutions probably don't know the answer yet. The funders were very keen that the principle that universities drive what metrics they want to collect be adhered to, and the set of standards. So instead of prescribing metrics, see where you want to go. Define the change you want to affect first, and then define what gets measured. Researchers still don't know about metrics, these kinds of metrics. There are some routes to education. It was mentioned that a library course exists at the University of Sheffield, but there's a general sense that it's not worth the time. The key is going to be to get the younger researchers to adopt, and of course, at its heart, we need a way to find some kind of incentives. But I'm not going to mention what those incentives could look like. On the topic of adoption, it is clearly discipline dependent. There's a first mover problem in a field. If others are doing it in your field, that can be seen to be acceptable. But if you're standing out on your own, there's still a feeling that maybe you could suffer, your reputation within your field could go down. Another group reported, in contrast to what I've just read, that this is all about the young researchers. They're more engaged. They're the ones who are doing this. Those at the top have no interest. So clearly we don't know what's going on there. Making them personal, though, was considered appealing. However, it is clear that we cannot mandate participation. And if we can't mandate participation, that means there can't really be a standard, because it's not going to be a level playing field. So if there isn't this kind of standard, then anyone who provides altmetric data, or even anyone who curates their own altmetric data, will inevitably curate them favorably. And at what point does that turn into cheating? How do we learn how to read altmetric data as funders? What other evidence might be provided? However, it was also recognized that gaming will happen, because gaming always happens. That you put a bunch of incredibly intelligent people together, and you put a big incentive, and they will figure out the best way to optimize their behavior to get to that incentive. So perhaps we could embrace that and use altmetrics as a way to incentivize researchers to make their research available in open access. It was said that it was important as well to not forget about the humanities. Books in particular were mentioned. It was felt that altmetrics could be used to raise the institutional profile, or even help with tracking public engagement. However, both new metrics and traditional citation counts just count hits. So both negative and positive hits are counted equally. And it was felt in the minds of some researchers that this means that the quality problem has adequately been answered. I dare say, has it ever? But anyway. Looking at what metrics are valuable around discipline level versus institutional level could also be interesting. Looking at late adopters of social media use, using social media metrics around their work could be helpful in showing the value of social media to them. I think the idea there is find a cohort of people who aren't doing anything, and if they start doing it, see if it helps them. And that acts as a good blank cohort. We did ask for standardization. Please use DOIs, use ORCIDs, make things interoperable. And where artifacts live in different places, And this will happen when content is promiscuous. Find a way to have usage data flow between those different object silos. How do we stop these being misused, a la the journal impact factor? Since there's no safety catch in Altmetrics, people are free to misuse them, and therefore openness and communication and conferences like this one could help. So that's the summary from yesterday. All right, now I'm just going to randomly pick up these breakout items. Yep. All right. So running straight from the thumb drive from Ewan's breakout group in room the A team. Ewan, was that right? Yeah. Yep. Have we made progress? In publishing, it's remarkable that it's almost mainstream. Not so much with researchers who aren't going from 9 to 10, but from 0 to 10 when it comes to understanding some of the tools. So you mean that they're just completely at a cold start at the moment?
Yeah.
Okay. What can we do? We can change the environment. We can make it okay to engage, both time-wise and career-wise. We can have case studies, real-life relatable stories. We can provide training on communicating with stakeholders, public and policymakers. On outputs, don't just publish articles. Promising that we're going in the right direction. Funders, publishers, researchers speaking to each other, not leaving everything up to other parties. So that was from one of the sessions today. Martin's group said that we have become very good at measuring things, but we're still at the beginning of understanding what it all means. Points that were heavily mirrored in the breakout group that I was sharing. Standards are important. We're on a journey, and I'm glad to be on this journey with all of you lovely people. What are the 3 most important things that are most important to work on in the next 6 to 12 months? And there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Jen, I'm not sure if you understand what the term metrics means. Counting is hard. Counting is hard. Nice lesson. So a manual for how to use Altmetrics and all of the tools available. Otherwise, it's too bewildering. With examples from cross communities. Who? Scholarly societies suggested, not funders or publishers. Challenge of outreach and engagement with researchers. Best practice, use cases, ways to do so varies from field to field. Identify material gains from Altmetrics. Bridge the gulf from the leaders and everyone else. Ownership of the data. Open data that is reusable to sustain the ecosystem with standards to make them comparable. Look at non-traditional outputs, particularly data and software, which we heard quite a bit about earlier today. Context on what each Altmetric means. What does a paper with 50 tweets or a citation mean? Content analysis of the activity captured in an Altmetric. How does it compare with other papers? ORCID, Fundref, publisher systems. Usage, downloads and XML downloads vary widely between and across all publishers. Altmetrics as an author service to tell stories about the impact of one's work, such as impact statements. I think I know a startup that's trying to do that. May not even use them as metrics at all, rather than just data for stories. That issue of what we call them and how we use them came up very heavily in the breakout session that I reported on. So have we made progress, and where do we go next? So it was felt that there's still confusion around the terms when that topic eventually had to come up sometime in this conference. And those of us who are really tightly engaged with the community, I think we're happy in ourselves. We found peace. But as we start to go and talk to other people, the questions that we struggled with for 5 years and finally found a way through them by ignoring them, we can see with other people. And so that remains a challenge. We have data, so that's a massive amount of progress. And the practitioners have made amazing progress. And the contrast was made between how long it takes to update a large platform like ISI, multiples of years leading to shitty outcome, compared to how quickly other vendors in the ALM space have been able to move. A growing variety of things is broadening our space of known bibliometricity. I didn't quite have under pressure on time when I got this. But the point is, bibliometricians have known for a long time that citations capture a thing, but they've known that there are gaps, and they can see those gaps starting to be filled in now. What we mean or understand, we don't quite know yet, but we know that there's illumination going out. What we see, we're not quite clear about. We felt that things that were important to do next, get the grey literature available, especially clinical guidelines. We felt that leaning on governments to embrace open data, but making their reports machine readable as part of what they consider to be open data could help with that. Context is vital. Get past the journal article already. It was identified that not everything is covered by the DOI economy, and that needs to be addressed. Continued transparency is critical. Make them operate on things that matter. And so don't let them just devolve to being vanity metrics. If they're going to be important, allow them to flow to problems that are hard problems that are important problems to solve. Don't stand still. Continue the dialogue between theory and practice, and this could be a good way to avoid the pitfalls that we've seen that have happened around other things like the journal impact factor. So that's a summary from the sessions. I think what we could do is, should we open it to the floor for a broader discussion? Kat? Yeah, okay, so over to you guys now. And if you don't say anything, then we're just going to peter out and wait for the coffee to come out and have that kind of thing where we talk to each other, which is also not a bad outcome.
This is all going on the blog, isn't it? Yeah? On the blog?
So the question is this all going on the blog?
Yeah.
And the answer is yes. Yeah, Damien.
I was just going to say, I think this is really great. It seems to me that there's been a lot of, I know we had a lot of like funders, institutions, and things about how they want to know people or departments or that kind of thing. It seems to me that the main use of ALMs is that it's so that authors can, so researchers can tell whether a paper is worth reading without having to read it. And that, I think, is not so from my point of view. Not one, so obviously we have an awful lot of papers that we do need to try and filter out in a way that allows us to make that assessment. You know, if that's the question that I think most needs answering, then how do we get there? I think that goes beyond just sort of public interest against stability against lots of other issues that Altmetrics are in. That wasn't the question.
Yeah, I'm not answering. I'm just coordinating, so I'm not going to answer. For some people, the most important thing that ALMs can provide is a way to find out what papers you should read without having to read all the papers. ... So how do we use them to help discovery? Cameron.
Do we get more demographic? We spend a lot of time collecting counts of stuff happening. The real value for many of us is trying to understand who's looking for stuff. And we've done a really, really bad job of providing any sort of geographical demographic data with the exception of Altmetrics.com. We just haven't done any real work on that. It feels like it's a missed opportunity.
Has anybody in the room worked at all on demographics around this? So the question was, could we get more demographic data? I'm repeating these questions for the live stream, and we're seated in front of a room full of people. I would not be surprised if someone knows someone who is looking or tackling at this issue, but there doesn't seem to be anyone willing to take that on.
Data. So we do it, but the problem is that you need to have all of the data based on the research. Like Twitter, it's difficult to do stuff with Twitter, right? Unless you've got license to pull in all tweets and things on your own system. You're just linking out Twitter and having this account on yours. You can't do that. So it's probably data availability.
Yeah, so the conclusion seems to be data availability is a challenge to that question. But it seems like you could even do controlled studies. I think Mendeley have good demographic data. So it was you, yeah.
I just wanted to comment on that. That's occasion to point out that the incomplete demographic data for the Altmetrics does not tell us enough who read the article. Because in some countries people will be more likely to post or blog.
Yeah, so the point's made that alone, that demographic data isn't as useful as knowing it along with its biases and how it's distributed.
Beyond the demographics, I think that there's many possibilities to further contextualizing the data. So that at the moment, it's very much metrics counting. In the case of other semantic analysis, we have maps that tell you about cognitive spaces. You can see how these cognitive spaces change, or you can have social network analysis. From the presentation I've seen these 2 days, there seems to be plenty of room to do this type of analysis with the underlying data.
Yeah, so comments made that more contextual like tools are available to apply to this problem, like graph analysis or semantic mapping. I think it's a really good point. That's an extremely exciting thing. So we'll go with you, then you, then you. Yeah.
And connecting to the contextualized data, in the literature of the Altmetrics, they mention Mendeley bookmarking as readership. But it's a big question. To what extent Mendeley bookmarking reflect readership? Through that, we did a large-scale survey with Mendeley users. It has not been published yet.
So what's the answer?
The answer is positive.
Okay, so the question is pointed out that Mendeley readership is often referred to as readership, but we didn't know if that's...
It means that Mendeley readership were true.
Yeah.
It's a good signal for Mendeley that people eventually, more than 80% of people that respond to our survey read more than half of the paper that bookmarking their own personal library.
Okay.
And the main reason for bookmarking the paper was for future citation, which is in agreement with previous literature and a survey about readership of academic papers. However, Mendeley readership or bookmarking can reflect other aspects of usage or context that an academic paper can be used, like using professional activities, educational activities, and this is one example of contextualizing and interpretation of Altmetrics.
Okay, so
in particular about Mendeley.
So again, for the people watching the webcast, it's mentioned that there are positive aspects and analyses that come out of looking at Mendeley readership, which can give us context. But that work is in press, I think. So, yeah.
In relation to this notion of the graph and the other analysis that's possible with greater demographic data, as a community, we have been very reticent to use or incorporate anonymization in a way that we can use more personally identified information that, say, a variety of other industry social media analysis is less reticent to do. Mm-hmm. And that if we could focus some time and attention on privacy questions and addressing how we might build in both privacy and use of more enriched data, would probably be a significant.
So the comment is made that we've totally ignored issues around anonymity and anonymization of the data, right? And that might be a powerful tool. And I'll just put in a pitch. I believe that Spot on London will be happening again this year, and that might be one of the main themes that they look at. So I think we've got time for maybe 2 more questions, or 3, depending on how they go. So
I was just going to make the comment based on the context question, that to a large extent, having somebody looking at something doesn't really matter unless they actually use it, I believe. And so what we want to do is understand how people use things. And looking at when they look at them, I think it's only useful if it has some correlation to when they're going to use it. And so I think for the Mendeley comment, that's quite interesting. It seems to be a positive correlation. But I think we should be somewhat careful about what we're measuring and make sure that it actually does this type of usage. Just as an example, I
So-
don't really care how many software downloads I have if someone doesn't actually use the software.
So the comment is made that fundamentally usage is the critical thing, and what we look at in terms of attention that's brought to those objects, we have to understand how that attention relates to the actual underlying usage of those objects. Is that fair? Yeah.
Wondering whether one something work analyzing cross-source feeds, so looking at Twitter and Mendeley and Facebook and to analyze with things like data analysis, blockchain, that sort of mathematical work.
So the question is asked, have people looked at cross-source indicators and the statistical relationship between them? And I think we know the answer to that is yes. There's a good body of literature about that, I think. But I think there's always room for more. We had someone yesterday, actually, who was dying to be asked about statistics, and very sadly, no one did. So it's, yeah, I'm going to take like just a couple more questions, or I mean comments, or not. Okay, so we're going to call it, we're going to go for coffee, and thank you all very much for your great contributions in the breakout sessions. A lot of really rich things came out. Pardon? What's the funding? Oh, and I'm just reminded to mention again that we do have a pot of money available from Thomson Reuters to do a piece of research around article level metrics, and the details are available on the blog. We need submissions in before the end of October. Yeah. Is that okay?